Hey everybody, my name is Shai, and I'm going to talk about multiplayer games for mobile. Just a little bit of background about myself. I started, let's see, that doesn't work, so. I started getting to play multiplayer games in a very young age with friends and family. We used to play LAN parties of 10, 20 guys together for the whole weekend, for hours. And actually, my obsession starts with multiplayer way back in the 90s when me and my father played for hours every time we would come back home. We'd play Command & Conquer games, Warcraft, all these really cool games. And this is how I got to understand better the multiplayer aspect in games and how you can connect with other people through multiplayer games. Today I'm the CEO of Nextpeer. Nextpeer is a multiplayer SDK for mobile game developers with more than 5,000 games integrated and live every month. And we have 120 million downloads of this multiplayer SDK. The truth is that actually two of the guys sitting here in the crowd are using our SDK in the games. And I'm going to share with you some stuff we learned at Nextpeer. I hope you're going to take it and learn from it. So what multiplayer can do to your game and what are the advantages from multiplayer? The first and most obvious one is that it makes the game more viral. Because you have multiplayer, players talk to their friends, talk to people and tell them, hey, let's play this together. So that makes the other person download it, and that makes your game more viral. This is a much bigger incentive to tell somebody else about the game because you can actually play together. The other thing is that it makes your game endless. So multiplayer basically enables that you can play the same map or the same level in the game multiple times, every time in a new experience, because you play with someone else, a new person. And that actually, a great benefit for especially indie game developers, because instead of creating a lot of content to your game, multiplayer adds an endless opportunity. So the other thing is that multiplayer creates engagement and retention, and I'm going to talk about it a little bit more later on in the deck. And it creates also the place to show off and brag, socialize as well. And most importantly, it opens up new monetization opportunities for the developer. I think that before starting to build a design a multiplayer mode or a multiplayer game, you should really understand who are your players. How do they like to engage? What do they like to do? So the first and most common example is the player gender. Female tend to collaborate more when male tends to compete. And for sure there are exceptions for this, but in general this rule applies for a lot of games. A famous research by Richard Bartle about the player's psychology. He basically proves that there are 4 different types of players in single player and multiplayer. And he talks about how these type of players work in a multiplayer environment. So let's just talk about the players. There are killers, players that like to challenge, to fight. The socializers that they like to share, trade, and gift. And the achievers that win, they just want to brag and show off. Where explorers they look around in the game, they find new features. And all these different type of players apply very well to a multiplayer environment. The killers, now instead of playing against the computer, playing against the bot, they can play with others, play with friends, which is a great thing for them. The socializers can form new relationships with other people in the game and share things now that other people can also look at. The achievers can show off on other people, and explorers can explore together. And when designing your game, you should really take into consideration all these 4 different types and make sure that you have some features of each type applies for your players. Now, one of the biggest things to remember when making multiplayer is to keep it simple. right? So a lot of game developers, tend to think that multiplayer is very complicated, and actually there are some ways to make it much more simple. In this example here, you can see that on the top there is a very complicated situation in multiplayer where players are all playing in the same time, shooting each other, and you need to use some predictions. What happens if there's latency issues and networking issues? And at the bottom you can see a famous game, Clash of Clans, that is doing very well. And in this game, there is actually asynchronous mode with recordings and ghost players that enables you to play whenever you want, but basically much more simple for the developer to make. One of actually the perception by the indie game developers usually is that synchronous multiplayer means that you have to do the real time, and the game has to be racing game, very complicated. But actually, the most complicated part of the game is all the process of matchmaking, invitation process, lobby system, chat, and all these features of multiplayer that are essential for playing with other people. If you can't have a lobby system, go online and quickly get somebody else to play with, then your multiplayer is basically meaningless. And these are the main issues and main things that developers need to focus on when developing multiplayer, not only the synchronization between players while in the game. Some game developers and big studios that did multiplayer, they claim that the development time for the multiplayer was as long as the whole development time for the game in the single player mode. And this is a crazy thing if you think about it. So you spend more time building multiplayer than just building the whole game from scratch. So I'm going to talk about a few things that we learned at Nextpeer. The first is multiplayer conversion. So in this screen, you can see on the top that there's a single player option and multiplayer. They look more or less the same. And the question is, how many people actually click on multiplayer? How many people are going to try my multiplayer mode in case I build it? And we saw that on average, 28% only of your players are going to try multiplayer. And that's actually, it's a number that you might think it's low, but the same players, the 28%, are the same players that are also very engaged with the game, the players that unlock new content, and also the players that are paying more. So we actually learned, based on more than 4,000 games analysis last time we did it, that the same players that try multiplayer are also paying more. And I'm going to prove it later on with some numbers and show you the differences between synchronous and asynchronous as well. Now let's talk about multiplayer retention. So we made a test on single player users only, players that don't even try multiplayer, and the players that do try multiplayer. And we saw that more than 150% retention in terms of average number of sessions per player is in multiplayer users, where in single player users to play much less. And now you might think that, again, these players are engaged with the game already, that's why they're trying multiplayer. But if you think about it, these players are also paying you at the end of the day. These players are looking for stuff from you, the developer, more content to be enabled in this game. And that's a great thing, so multiplayer can really add more. Another huge issue in multiplayer, I think it's the biggest issue in multiplayer, and I think that's the one thing that we do very well also, is having players online 24/7, right? So if you're just starting, if you're an indie game developer or even a big studio, you need to have, according to our numbers, more than 200,000 daily active users to make sure that there are online players in your game all the time. Because what happens if you go online in the US, it's 3 a.m. and you're looking for another person to play with, and there's nobody. You wait for a couple of minutes, and then you wait for maybe an hour, and then you just leave it, right? So multiplayer really requires you to have enough players all the time online. There are there are actually many ways to solve this problem. First is AI for sure, so you can make some artificial intelligence to solve this problem. Maybe bots players. But at Nextpeer, we actually use something called recordings and ghost players. The recording system works in the way that Nextpeer records every player that is playing online, and then if somebody goes online and there's nobody else to play with, we just let them play with the recording, maybe for a couple hours ago, maybe for a day ago, and then they basically have another person to play with, even though they're not there right now online in synchronous mode. Now, 99% of our games are using this ghosts and recordings for real players, and then we also have something that basically let the player play with online players first, and in case there's nobody else online, then we give them a recorded player. The maximum waiting for this recording system is only 5 seconds. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and then if there's nobody else to play, you get a recorded player. The way it works, which is actually very interesting if you're looking to do this on your own, is that we're doing basically the algorithm that shows every level in your game or every multiplayer mode have different random seed generator. The seed generator are basically different numbers that the level, the map is generated based on. This is more tech stuff. I hope you're not getting too complicated here. And then the recordings that are based on each of these seed numbers and the levels and the maps. And for each level also of the players, we have different recordings to make sure that when you go online and play, you're not only going to find somebody else to play with, they're also going to be in the same level, and the competition is going to be fair. Now, let's talk about Facebook, and if Facebook works in multiplayer, and how we can make it work even better. In this screen, you can see on the left that there are two options for players: play online and play with Facebook friends, or connect with Facebook friends. In this case, only 2% of the players are going to click on Facebook friends playing. Right? And this is a shocking number, right? You might think that players that like to play multiplayer, and I'm talking, by the way, about engaged players in multiplayer, online multiplayer, they're not even trying Facebook. And you might be asking yourself why. So it could be for a lot of reasons. One of the reasons that some players don't like to share their activity with everybody else online, on Facebook, because the guys they have on Facebook not necessarily playing the same games. But you can see on the right an example, from Candy Crush that's pretty famous. But we also saw that with games using our software, that if you offer an incentive for players like live, so maybe we have one example that game offered 200 coins for the users that signing with Facebook. And in this case, it could go up to 49% and 50% of engagement with Facebook. Now, the good news is that Facebook, the guys that do connect, the users that do connect with Facebook, are inviting friends, about 1.1 each on average. And from those who, the invitees basically, are 50% chance that they will download the game and join. Which means that you basically get, for every 2 players that connected with Facebook, 1 new user for free. So again, if you want to use Facebook, you must give some rewards, something for the user, an incentive to sign up with Facebook. Another very important thing in multiplayer is the player identity. Now, every player wants to have an identity when they engage in an online environment. So this is an example actually from QuizUp. So in QuizUp, you can see that every player, they have their name, their profile picture, their timeline picture, some level, and a flag. And we saw that more than 25% of our players customize their name, and a lot of them also want to change their picture. Now, having a country, a flag, or the name of the country you're playing from makes it all much more better, because you feel part of something big, right? And you're playing against somebody else in a different country, you have a huge incentive to win because they're from a different country and you want to show off with it. The other thing that is very important is not to show the player losings, only show winnings. So, for example, imagine you're playing Candy Crush and then you see that somebody else is stuck on level 100 and they played this level for more than 600 times already. And you're like, what the heck, this guy's spending all this. It turns them off. So you don't want to show the players how many losings they have. You've got to show them how many the winnings. Just like leaderboards and achievements, you only show good stuff, not the bad stuff about the player. And this is very important in multiplayer because, again, you need to have something for the player to show off with. Now, the other point is about levels and matchmaking. So in multiplayer, imagine you go online and then you have a player that is already playing for hours and days. He's much more experienced. He's at a very experienced level, and he just kicks your ass. You don't want to come back to multiplayer anymore or right after something like that happens, unless you're really a killer and you just want to try again, right? So in this case, what you need to do is have players segmentations per level. So let's say level 1 to 3, depends on how you count your level in your game. They can play together as a group, and players in levels above 3 can play in a different group, and so on. Another very important thing to remember is the socializers and explorers. So we talked about it early on. So there are killers, achievers, socializers, and explorers. And in this, what I'm actually showing here is a screenshot of when you finish playing multiplayer, you can actually share a screenshot from your game. That's something that we did at Nextpeer, and it works really well. So more than 50% of our players share their moments, share their achievement while they play multiplayer. They want to show off with it after they finish playing. And this screenshot goes to some place place called a game stream. This is something that we built. This is newsfeed that shows how you're doing, how other players are doing in the game. And it's a great way for the socializers and explorer to see what's happening in the game, to see how players are doing, what features they're using, what power-ups they're buying. And it also, I'm going to talk about it soon, about monetization. And this also help you monetize more, because players see what other people are buying, and it makes them buy more. Now, this is about the difference between asynchronous and synchronous, and both. So you can see here that multiplayer keeps players engaged and busy in the long run, but not all the different type of players created equal. So, for example, you can see that synchronous players they create less revenues, but they have more buyers, and asynchronous players create more revenues, but the number of plays is lower, right? But if you have both options, if you have asynchronous and synchronous together, then you get the best out of the monetization part in the game. And why is that? So players want to have the option to play synchronous, but in case they have nobody else to play with, or maybe the recording is too boring for them, they can also play asynchronous. So you need to have those two options available in your game. This is actually research made by a company named Congregate, and it proves that the top games have both the asynchronous and synchronous options, while the option for both actually generate, you can see here, $51 per RPU, right? ARPU, and then you can see also that the number of players and number of buyers is the highest in the both cases. Now, another thing about monetization, so if you want to encourage players to buy more and use more in-app purchases, you can give them the ability, again, to show off and let the other players know about it. So, for example, let's say I'm buying a nice sword in a game, then I'm using it in multiplayer, and you need to make sure that other players know in some way that I got this thing. Or maybe they see a recording of my game and how it was look like, just like in Clash of Clans. So you see what the other player has, and then you want to have it as well. And this encourages a lot of in-app purchases in your game. Also, being able to be part of a clan, a guild, or just a group, this may encourage players to buy more because they feel committed to that group and they help each other in that group. And all these kind of things encourage players to make more in-app purchases. Now, at the end of the day, I think it's all about your passion. So for me, it's about connecting people through games, whether it's making a better bond between friends or making new friends in the multiplayer. I mean, so if you really, if that's what you're passionate about, then there are ways to do it. You can do it on your own, or you can use other services or SDKs to help you out. Again, I'm talking about indie game developers as well as big studios. And I think that you can enjoy a lot more from a multiplayer game, even between your colleagues in the office when building the game. Thank you so much. If you have any questions, I'm here. Anybody? If I have a booth, no, but you can reach out right after. I have a card, so yeah.
I was just kind of curious about the recording for the Ghost game.
Mm-hmm.
What type of game would that work for? Because I feel like with a lot of games, the other player's actions depend on your actions.
Right, it's a great question. So a lot of games do work with recordings, but you gotta design your multiplayer mode to fit with that recording system. Now, if you're talking about an RPG, first-person shooter game, then yes, recordings might be an issue there. But imagine you have a car racing game, then there's no problem having the other player ghost and maybe even doing some more record on the client to figure out things. Most of the games that, we have games in all the different categories. I mean, so the two guys sitting here right now, one of them have a sports game, the other a parking game, and both work very, very well with the ghost players. And I assume that most of the people here also develop games that are casual games, more simple games than if you're building a first-person shooter, then you can do multiplayer in a much more advanced way. You don't even need. You should have the same amount of money to spend on buying users, so you're going to have activity in the game because you're building such a complicated game as well. Sure, yeah. Slides are going to be online, right? Yeah. Okay, so I'll show you the slide. Yeah.
You guys have a Unity plugin, or what all platforms does your SDK fit into?
Right. So we fit with all majority of the engines. We have Unity, we have CocoaCityX, we have libgdx, and all the rest of them.
Corona?
Corona, we are working on it, but at the moment we don't have Corona yet. Yeah. Any other questions? Okay, thank you so much. It was really a pleasure.